Good morning. I hereby call this 11th meeting of the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission for the year 2019 to order and ask that you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. As always, we want to give you a reminder to please review the safety information on the inside of the cover of our agenda. And also please note that the commission will act on various matters at today's meeting, which is open to the public. However, since adequate forums have been made available for public participation in cases before the commission, there is no opportunity for the public to address the commission at this public meeting. Our first matter on the morning's agenda is the approval of those great minutes on my birthday, May 23rd of 2019. And the editor is Commissioner Coleman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've reviewed the minutes of the May 23rd, 2019 public meeting, and I move that they be approved as presented.
You have heard the motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
They were both very loud in my ears. So.
Dave was louder.
Who's your favorite child?
I like that. Whew, that's a tough one, right? Second by Vice Chairman Sweets.
Oh.
I should be pouting at this point, I guess.
Any further discussion or edits or comments? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion to approve the minutes passes 5-0. And next, we will call on our Secretary, Rosemary Chiavetta, to lead us through today's agenda.
Good morning, Madam Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Your various offices and bureaus have prepared the following agenda for your consideration. Therefore, let us begin on page 1 with the matters presented by Director Monahan and the Bureau of Audits. It is recommended that the Commission adopt both audit reports appearing on page 1.
Is there a motion to adopt the staff recommendations?
So moved?
Is there a second?
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Place, second by Commissioner Coleman. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
Turning to page 2, in matters presented by Director Sophie and the Office of Special Assistance, it is recommended in an omnibus motion that the Commission adopt all of the items on page 2, beginning with the nomination of Kevin J. Cohen to serve on the TRS Advisory Board, and continuing to include all the items on page 3, ending with the Bureau of Investigation and Enforcement versus Great American Power LLC. And with regard to that last item, Madam Chairman, there is one note of correction that the recommendation should reflect to read that the Commission adopt the proposed opinion and order that approves the settlement agreement, period.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt the staff recommendations?
So moved?
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Place, second by Vice Chairman Sweet. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
Turning to page 4, it is recommended that the Commission adopt the proposed opinion and order in the complaint of Alan Schmuckler versus PPL Electric Utilities.
Is there a motion to adopt the staff recommendation?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Coleman, second by Commissioner Kennard. Any discussion?
Madam Chair, I have a motion.
Vice Chairman Sweet.
Thank you. I ask that my motion be placed upon the record as if I'd read it in its entirety. In this case, the administrative law judge found that the complainant had not proven that the installation of a smart meter by PP&L would deprive him and his wife of a healthy environment, and denied the request that the Commission order the removal of a smart meter from the house of his neighbor, who was not a party to the case. Complainant asserted that he has been electromagnetically sensitive for 30 years and has had to leave various jobs or have accommodations made for him to avoid being near any source of electromagnetic radiation. In complainant's 19 exceptions, He challenges the judgment of the ALJ regarding, excuse me, witness credibility, quality of evidence, recitation and application of the law, and the ALJ's advice that he take his objections to smart meters to the General Assembly. As the ALJ's judgment regarding these matters are based on her immediate impression of the hearing, the quality of PP&L witnesses' curriculum vitae, her correct statement of the law, and its application, the complainant's exceptions are denied. Excuse me, I'm sorry. PP&L filed 2 exceptions, but the ALJ's taking of judicial notice was improper in this instance, and that the safety recommendations in the initial decision are not appropriate. These exceptions are granted for the reasons set forth in the full motion. Therefore, I move that, number 1, that the exceptions of Alan Schmuckler are denied. Number 2, that the exceptions of PP&L are granted. 3, that the initial decision of Administrative Law Judge Elizabeth Barnes in this case, captioned Alan Schmuckler versus PP&L Electric Utilities Corporation, docket number C 2017-262-1285 is adopted and as modified by this motion. And finally, that the Office of Special Assistants prepare an appropriate opinion and order consistent with this motion. Thank you.
You have heard the motion of Vice Chairman Sweet. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Place. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0. On the matter as amended, is there any objection to taking the previous roll call? Seeing none, the matter as amended passes 5-0.
It is recommended in an omnibus motion that the commission adopt the remaining 2 items on page 4, beginning with the complaint of D. Ann Wilson versus the Pico Energy Company, and continuing to include the single item on page 5, the complaint of Floyd Tillman versus the Philadelphia Gas Works.
Is there a motion to adopt the staff recommendations?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Kennard, second by Commissioner Coleman. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
Turning to page 6, and matters presented by Director Diskin and the Bureau of Technical Utility Services. It is recommended in an omnibus motion that the commission adopt all of the items on page 6, beginning with the application of PennDOT and continuing to include the item at the top of page 7, the application of the York Water Company.
Is there a motion to adopt the staff recommendations?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Place, second by Commissioner Kennard. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
It is recommended that the commission adopt the proposed order in the application and petition of PPL Electric Utilities.
Is there a motion to adopt the staff recommendation?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Place, second by Commissioner Coleman. Any discussion?
Madam Chairman, I have a motion in this matter,
Commissioner Kennard.
and I would ask that it be entered into the record as if it was read in its entirety. Before the commission is the application of PPL, in which the company seeks permission to rebuild its existing, I should have practiced this beforehand, Brettingville, Albertus, I hope I pronounced that correctly, 500 kV transmission line. The case comes back to us on appeal to the Commonwealth Court from a prior commission which denied the application. PPL has provided us with additional information which has been reviewed by the offices and by the commission staff, and specifically on the issue of need. PPL avers that the proposed project will improve reliability by 1, avoiding unacceptable low voltage and voltage drops, and 2, preventing certain safety violations. Specifically, PPL explains that without the proposed project, a NERC reliability violation, so-called N11 contingency, may occur. If this were to occur, PPL would need to interrupt service to 10,000 commercial and residential distribution customers to protect the grid from the risk of cascading outage and blackout events and to prevent equipment damage. PJM staff conducted analysis that independently verified that the identified voltage violations would occur if the product were not completed. The regulatory test for approval under our regulations at 52 PA Code 57.76 is whether the project is necessary for the accommodation, safety, and convenience of the public. Specifically, the regulations include various criteria, including need, health risk, environmental impact. In my opinion, PPL has clearly met all of these criteria. In the absence of completing the project, customers may be at risk for interruptions in service as early as the summer of 2021, and much more likely to occur in the summer of 2023. If PPL were to begin construction at this time, the work could be finished by April of 2021, prior to the forecast of potential problems. Obviously, PPL's customers are statutorily entitled, and it is this commission's obligation to ensure that service is reasonably continuous and uninterrupted, and is appropriate for PPL to remedy the situation on their transmission facilities. There has been some controversy as to whether our regulations apply or the PJM regulations apply. What I'm suggesting in my motion is that the state requirements apply, and this is not a federal project. It's filed for under state law. We will be applying state law. The Pennsylvania criteria do not include issues of cost allocation, or cost incurrence, and we should not now read that into our regulations. As I've said a couple of months ago when this issue first came before the commission, if we want to change the rules, then we should open up a rulemaking docket and invite participation by the public and amend it in that way, not by ignoring our regulations or inserting items in there that don't exist. Therefore, Madam Chairman, I move that the petition of PPL for the waiver of certain provisions of the commission regulations at 52 PA Code 57.71 is be approved. That the application of PP Electric for approval to rebuild the 6 miles of the Brenningville, Albertus 500 kV transmission line is approved. That the Bureau of Technical Utility Services prepare an order consistent with this motion.
You have heard the motion of Commissioner Kennard. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Coleman. Discussion on the motion.
Yes, I have a statement on the matter.
Commissioner Place.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, my statement be placed in the record as if I'd read it in its entirety. Before the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission is the application of PPL Electric Utilities Corporation filed pursuant to 52 PA Code Chapter 57, Subchapter G of the Commission's Transmission Line Siting Regulations. PPL Electric requests Commission approval to rebuild the existing 6-mile-long single-circuit Bridings-Ville, Alberta's 500 kV transmission line in Lower Macungie and Upper Macungie Townships in Lehigh County. And the petition for waiver of certain provisions of our regulations for Commission review of siting and construction of electric transmission. The proposed project will rebuild the current transmission line into a double-circuit transmission line, including the replacement of all existing 27 transmission line structures and the installation of 2 new structures. PPL Electric states that the total estimated cost of the proposed project is $33 million. My statement in this matter is lengthy. The salient points, however, are as follows. This is not a project necessary to replace aging infrastructure. The facilities being replaced are about 37 years old, with a useful life expectancy of approximately 80 years. The facilities involved are very reliable. This is not a worst-performing circuit. PPL Electric states that the subject transmission lines have an average of 0 unplanned outages per year over the last 5 years, and that the 2 subject lines associated with an N-1-1 event have never been out of service at the same time. PPL has filed this project as a supplemental project necessary to enhance the reliability of distribution service to its customers. However, responses to detailed data requests confirm that the probability of 2 of the 3 lines serving this circuit being out of service at the same time are close to 0. In short, customers have never lost service due to outages of these 2 500 kV lines, and thus PPL clearly has not established need to address local reliability. As a local reliability supplemental project, all project costs of this transmission facilities would be allocated 100% to the company's customers. PPL Electric has alleged that there may be baseline bulk electric system reliability violations if this application is not approved. As PJM has not performed a full reliability analysis, it therefore has not analyzed whether there is a more cost-effective solution that resolves the identified regional reliability violations. Regional facilities of 500 kV needed for bulk electric system reliability have their costs allocated 50% on the load ratio share basis across the PJM region, 50% based on the solution-based DFACS method. In short, if PPL Electric is correct that a bulk electric system reliability violation must be addressed, the company has not adequately identified all credible alternatives, including going through the PJM RTEP process to address the bulk electric system reliability violations, including the relative costs and allocation of factors of each of these alternatives. Based on the above, I support denial of the proposed application, given PPL Electric's failure to demonstrate need for the proposed project and to examine alternative solutions. I believe that the more prudent course is for the company to submit this project as a baseline solution to be examined by PJM and included in the RTEP after all alternatives have been fully vetted by PJM. I believe that PJM Electric's customers should not bear the full cost burden for the very high voltage regional facilities in this application when other alternative approaches exist. To note the point, need is in question. Need is not determined here, and cost absolutely is fundamentally as part of our regulatory obligations. Therefore, I support the staff recommendation in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Place. Is there any other comments? I do have a comment for the record. I ask that my comments be spread upon the record in their entirety, and I will try my best to summarize, but apologize in advance that I probably will have some duplication with the statements you just heard from Commissioner Place. You've heard clearly in terms of what the project is that's before us. Both PPL and PJM have stated that if the project is not constructed, voltage violations to the bulk electric system could manifest in the year 2023. I note that PPL's analysis, which identifies violations during the 2021 summer peak, has not been verified by PJM because this project was filed as a transmission owner-driven supplemental project, once again, which you have just heard from Commissioner Place's statements. PJM performs an abbreviated do no harm study for supplemental projects. The fact that the violations which were identified impact the bulk electric system, I just lost my place, excuse me. 3 years in the future is reason enough for PPL to include this project as a baseline solution in PJM's 2019 Regional Transmission Expansion Plan, or RTIP, for full reliability analysis. And that would be to look at the study how this project fits into the regional transmission plan and to consider all viable alternatives, efficiencies, and costs. An added benefit of the RTEP process is that if PJM concludes that the project solves regional baseline violations and selects PPL's proposed solution of a 500 kV transmission line, 50% of that cost is allocated regionally, 50% is allocated to the PPL zone, and the project is put out for a competitive bid to discipline costs. It's true that the Commission's high voltage line siting regulations in Chapter 57 do not discuss cost allocation since they predate the FERC orders which provide for transmission planning and cost allocation. However, I do believe that ratepayer costs are and should always be one of the Commission's top priorities. Commission precedent in numerous Commonwealth Court cases support the premise that the Commission can consider cost when ruling on a siting application. This project is estimated to cost about $33 million, and that's really only an estimate. In terms of cost, construction for transmission projects often exceed cost estimates. So this $33 million that will be placed into PPL's transmission rates until this line is fully depreciated at least 40 years from now. I must point out that the existing line is only midway through its useful life, and more importantly, it has had 0 unplanned outages. PPL states that this line will be a third 500 kV source of power to the Brennicksville substation, which currently has two 500 kV sources, and that this third line will be co-located on the poles carrying one of the other two existing 500 kV sources. Should a catastrophic weather event occur, it is very likely that the two 500 kV lines will go down instead of one because they are located on the same poles. Also, in the event that a severe weather event occurs that causes the loss of both lines, the damage to the distribution system would likely reduce load on the 138 kV and the 69 kV systems, thereby avoiding the voltage fluctuation that PPL seeks to avoid with this project. I understand and advocate for our electric utilities to be proactive in maintaining and hardening their distribution and transmission systems. However, I would be remiss if I did not note that supplemental projects cost in PJM are on the rise, while baseline project spending has declined. In 2018, in PJM, new baseline project spending with the attendant PJM reliability analysis was $2.1 billion, while new supplemental project spending left primarily to individual state oversight was more than twice that. It was $5.7 billion. It goes without saying that PPL and all of our electric utilities must invest in the grid, but I encourage them to utilize the appropriate processes developed in the RTEP and approved by FERC so that ratepayer money is used prudently, so that this critical work is done efficiently, and so that the commission meets its regionalization and reciprocity obligations under Chapter 28 of the Public Utility Code. Given the cost of this project and because the primary drivers for the project address baseline bulk electric system violations, it should be resubmitted as a baseline project for the full evaluation by PJM pursuant to the RTEP process. Should PJM's evaluation result in the selection of the same solution that PPL has proposed, I would be more likely to examine it favorably. PPL has not established the need for this project at this time and has not met its burden of satisfying the engineering justification requirements found in Section 57.72C5 of our regulations. Therefore, I will be voting to deny the application and respectfully vote no on the motion. Are there any comments or discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Opposed?
I also will be voting in the negative. Motion passes 5-3. On the matter as 5-2.
3 to 2.
Excuse me, 3-2.
3-2.
Thank you for the correction. I'll state it again. The motion passes 3-2, noting the dissent of Commissioner Place and the chairman. All right. I apologize. On the matter as amended, is there any objection to taking the previous roll call? Seeing none, the matter as amended passes 3-2, noting the dissent of Commissioner Place and myself.
Continuing on page 7, it is recommended that the commission adopt in an omnibus motion the remaining two items on page 7, beginning with the application of Locus Telecommunications, and continuing to include all of the items on page 8, all the items on page 9, and all of the items on page 10, ending with the application of Cobiona LLC.
Is there a motion to adopt the staff recommendations?
So moved?
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Place, second by Vice Chairman Sweet. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
Turning to page 11, and matters presented by the Law Bureau, it is recommended that the commission adopt the proposed order in the petition of BKE Energy.
Is there a motion to adopt the staff recommendation?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Coleman, second by Commissioner Kennard. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
It is recommended that the Commission adopt the proposed order regarding alternative rate-making methodologies.
Is there a motion to adopt the staff recommendation?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Kennard, second by Commissioner Coleman. Under discussion, I do have a motion, so I'm going to turn it over to
No, don't break a trend now.
Vice Chairman Sweet to preside.
I'll exert my authority
There
without
you
the
go.
assistance of
Okay.
the gavel, and you are recognized for the purposes of offering your motion, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I ask that my motion be read into the record in its entirety, and I will do my best to abbreviate it. Before the Commission's day is the final policy statement order identifying factors to consider in determining just and reasonable rates. There are considerable shifts in the rate-setting environment for electric, natural gas, and water utilities. Look no further than the increased adoption of rooftop solar, increased investment in microturbine CHP units, and the significant movement towards consolidation in the water industry. Recognizing these trends, amongst other things, the Commission set out with the instant proceeding. During the pendency of this proceeding, Governor Wolf signed Act 58 of 2018 into law. This bill recognized similar shifts in the utility landscape. The act permits the Commission to approve alternative rate proposals, including but not limited to formula rates, multi-year rate plans, and performance-based rates. This final policy statement provides guidance on inputs that may be considered in future rate proceedings. These considerations augment but do not substitute in any way the rate case filing input requirements enumerated in the Commission's regulations. This additional guidance for utilities is timely given the passage of Act 58. Nonetheless, I believe the effectiveness of this final policy statement would be improved with the inclusion of utility reliability considerations. As submitted by the Advanced Energy Economy Institute, the Commission can consider reliability performance when designing rates. As such, I believe it would be prudent to include a provision in the policy statement which considers how the rate proposal will support improvements in utility reliability. Such consideration is further highlighted by Act 58, which states that, I quote, utility rate making should encourage and sustain investment through appropriate cost recovery mechanisms to enhance safety, security, reliability, or availability of utility infrastructure, end quote. I wish to thank the commenters for their helpful and thorough input, and I look forward to utilizing this policy statement as the Commission reviews rate cases in the future. Therefore, I move that, one, final policy statement on fixed utility distribution rates be modified consistent with this policy, and the Law Bureau prepare a final policy statement consideration with this motion.
Thank you. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Kennard. Is there any further discussion?
Yes, I have a statement on the matter.
You are recognized. Commissioner Place.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, I ask that my statement be placed in the record as if I read it in its entirety. Before the Commission today, as noted, is the final policy statement order in the above captioned matter. Our review of the staff recommendation includes the extensive record of comments and reply comments to the Commission's proposed policy statement regarding what future rate-making policy should guide an evolving utility economic landscape, one that is driven by technological change, declining consumption, evolving policy, and the need for utility resilience in light of potential physical and cyber threats. In addition to setting forth the purpose and scope of the policy statement and the distribution rate considerations parties should address with any specific proposal, the proposed policy statement listed a few illustrative rate design and rate-making mechanism options. Many of the commenters expressed concern that inclusion of illustrative examples was expressing a clear preference for the stated approaches or precluded de facto consideration of other alternatives. Others emphasized the oft-stated mantra that one size doesn't fit all. I want to be clear that it was not my intent to limit the options enumerated in Act 58, nor was it my intent to express a preference at the expense of other creative rate design or rate-making mechanisms. Rather, my intention was to provide options for the industry to consider as they address the evolving utility economic landscape. That said, I continue to be interested in proposals that remove barriers and provide incentives to utilize energy efficiency, encourage development of cost-effective distributed energy resources, and encourage more efficient use of our energy distribution infrastructure. Currently, we are presented with opportunities to enable emerging technologies such as energy efficiency and distributed energy systems in the form of solar photovoltaic facilities, batteries, fuel cells, combined heat and power, and electric vehicles, all of which affect energy distribution systems in both positive and negative manners. For example, if EVs draw charging power directly from the grid during peak usage periods, costly investments on the distribution grid may well be required. Conversely, rate designs which encourage off-peak charging could help improve capacity utilization and lower overall rates. Similarly, DERs can produce power on peak and provide other grid services and help avoid some distribution and transmission investments, while DERs which produce energy off peak may impose cost on the distribution grid. The point being is to provide proper price signals to encourage the former and not the latter. Similarly, customer-based energy efficiency in DER systems may reduce system throughput, thus reducing utility revenues. However, do we remove utility disincentives to mitigate those impacts while encouraging cost-effective investments in these distribution technologies? Despite these emerging technologies, rate design and rate-making mechanisms have not evolved in Pennsylvania. Providing illustrative examples was intended to encourage innovation to help customers and utilities move forward to minimize future long-term costs, allocate capital more efficiently, and achieve important policy objectives. I hope that the final policy statement, as written, can provide the important guidance to meet these stated fiscal policy objectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Place. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we will vote on the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None opposed. The motion carries 5-0. Without objection, we'll take the same roll call on the matter as modified. Seeing no objection, the matter is approved 5-0. Thank you.
You turning it back over to me?
Turn it back.
Okay.
I assumed you'd grasp the reins of power on your own.
I never do that. Thank you.
It is recommended that the commission adopt the proposed order in the petition for declaratory order filed by the Electric Division of the PECO Energy Company.
Is there a motion to adopt the staff recommendation?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Place, second by Commissioner Coleman. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
Turning to page 12, it is recommended that the commission adopt the proposed order regarding the policy statement and the reporting of operating revenues for assessment purposes by jurisdictional telecommunications carriers.
Is there a motion to adopt the staff recommendation?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Kennard, second by Commissioner Coleman. Any discussion?
Madam Chairman, if your indulgence, just for the audience's understanding, we have 3 dockets coming up in the next two pages. This one is a policy statement on helping to define within the telecommunications context what are gross intrastate operating revenues when the line is shared and used for interstate and intrastate purposes. Our statute says gross intrastate operating revenues are the assessable basis. We want to make sure that all carriers are paying their fair share and are not carriers that are essentially getting a free ride at the expense of others who pay. We put it out for comment. We received the comments upon due deliberation. We, I think, prepared today to act on those. The next 2 items at the end of this agenda deal with entities in the telecommunications space that don't file their assessment report. Assessment reports are a requirement under the under our code, under our regulations. We require all carriers to do it. there are a lot of carriers in the telecom space, but so are there in the motor carrier section where we have done this for years. If you don't file a report, you will receive a call from us. If you don't respond to the call, you will get a letter from us. If you don't respond to the letter, you will get a complaint from us or a motion to revoke your certificate. It's just good governance. It keeps our dockets clear. It's a matter of docket management. Secondarily, if you file 0 in the motor carrier space, you also receive a call. You also will receive a letter. You'll also receive a revocation notice if you don't respond. 0 means to me that you're not in business or you're not providing a jurisdictional service. And we're going to be looking into those instances as well. So I'm, Madam Chairman, pleased that we're taking all these matters up for consideration today by the commission to clean up the telecom space, which has been in need of this for some period of time.
Thank you, Commissioner Kennard. Any further comments on this case?
Yes, I have a statement on the matter.
Commissioner Place.
Thank you very much. Madam Secretary, I ask that my statement be placed into record as if I had read it in its entirety. Before us is the final recommendation regarding the adoption of a previously proposed policy statement. Under the policy statement, telecommunications carriers that are certified by this commission and operate in Pennsylvania offering jurisdictionally mixed telecommunications services, e.g. mainly private line and special access services, but report 0 gross intrastate revenues on those services due to the Federal Communications Commission's 10% contamination rule, would be obligated for fiscal assessment purposes to report their de facto gross intrastate operating revenues and pay an assessed amount of this commission's cost for administrating the Public Utility Code. The majority of the commenting parties, including such entities as the Pennsylvania Telephone Association, the Verizon Companies, and the Broadband Cable Association of Pennsylvania, have actively opposed the adoption of this policy statement. Their comments have raised several serious legal and technical concerns, have strongly recommended against its adoption. I share many of the concerns that these commenting parties have expressed, and I will summarize them as follows. 1, this matter should be addressed through a collective process, a collaborative process, or through a legislative solution, as certain parties have already suggested. 2, the adoption of the de facto intrastate revenues premise and theory will lead into inevitable conflict with applicable FCC jurisdictional separation rules. 3, the FCC's 10% contamination rule that affects the intrastate classification of private line and special access services, circuits, and services of telecommunications carriers also affects the corresponding revenues. Consistent with existing FCC guidance, these revenues are reported to the FCC, and they are used for a number of federal purposes, including the payment of the FCC regulatory fees. They are not reported to this commission, and they are not subject to this agency's fiscal assessments. 4, FCC's existing guidance notwithstanding, the recommended policy statement does not contain a practically applicable and adequately defined methodology through which the de facto intrastate gross revenues subject to the fiscal assessments of the Commission can be readily identified and quantified. 5, the recommended policy statement does not contain any concrete reporting form where supporting information for the derivation of the de facto intrastate revenues can be included and easily cross-checked with other reports that this commission receives. This can easily lead to dissimilar reporting, the non-uniform treatment of telecommunications carriers. 6, the recommended policy statement cannot be promulgated as such in its present form. Its immediate and anticipated implementation effects will be akin to those of a substantive rulemaking. 7, applying the binding norm test that is being utilized by Pennsylvania's appellate courts, the recommended policy statement is an unpromulgated regulation that is in conflict with applicable federal law and regulations. For the above-referenced reasons, I will be respectfully dissenting from the disposition of this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Place. Any further discussion on this?
Madam Chair,
Chairman Sweet.
very quickly on one aspect of that long list of concerns expressed by Commissioner Place. I really don't have the time, nor did I have the energy this morning to attempt to digest all of that and to prepare a full and complete response. But let me just say on one aspect of this, which is the question of the appropriate use of a policy statement. A policy statement expresses what an administrative agency hopes and predicts it will do in implementing future rulemakings or future adjudications. I mean, that is the precise purpose of a policy statement. And I would quote from Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission versus Norristown School District, the comment that a general statement of policy, on the other hand, does not establish a binding norm. A policy statement announces the agency's tentative intentions for the future. When the agency applies the policy in a particular situation, it must be prepared to support the policy just as if the policy statement had never been issued. The policy statement is a prediction. It is a guidepost for those who are regulated to understand what the agency might well do in a set of circumstances that has not yet come before us yet, but may in the future. Each of those sets of circumstances will be looked at in their own merits and weighed against the guidepost. It is purely a guidepost and a prediction. And its use here, it seems to me, is entirely appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Sweet. I do have comments also for the record. I ask that they be placed on the record in their entirety as if I read them. And I will really condense mine because you've heard a lot of discussion so far on this case. And I would just focus on my main point, which is that I was hoping in our discussion in this case that we could consider the approach that was suggested by the PTA to convene a collaborative to explore other options and to address the concerns with reliance on the 10% rule that you have already heard about. I believe that these are important because federal laws permit non-discriminatory and reasonable burdens on interstate commerce. Precedent requires states to enforce federal law. A CPC not only ensures compliance with that obligation, but also provides commission processes to resolve disputes, promote competition, and protect Pennsylvania consumers and companies. Other federal precedent states that assessments for state universal service and dispute resolution do not violate a federal prohibition on rate regulation or market entry of interstate services. In the case of a mixed jurisdictional services and traffic, the FCC permits use of a safe harbor approach, allowing the states to assess a fixed portion of revenues for state universal service purposes so long as there is no double counting. There's no case law holding that the ban on assessing interstate revenues for state universal service extends to assessments for government operations. And for these reasons, I will be respectfully voting no. Any further statements?
I just want to make two observations, if I could, Madam Chairman.
Commissioner Kennard.
Thank you. The first is that the 10% contamination rule requires an analysis of the fact that more than 10%, that 10% or more is interstate. We don't get that now. So for the carriers to complain that they would have to undertake expensive studies is an obligation on them now, which they are ignoring. And we're simply holding them to their feet to that fire. The second is that because this is in combination with the zero reporter aspect of the docket, that if you don't have interstate revenues, if you're able to demonstrate that they're all interstate revenues, then you don't have a PA certificate. So we don't certificate a carrier that only has interstate services. So there's the two aspects to this, and these interplay, and I just wanted to point that out. And thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Any further comments or statements? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Opposed?
I will also be voting in the negative. The motion passes 3-2, noting the dissent of Commissioner Place and myself. I can't get my counting together this morning. Sorry.
It is recommended that the commission adopt the proposed order in the petition for reconsideration regarding the Winola Water Company.
Is there a motion to adopt the staff recommendation?
So moved?
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Place, second by Commissioner Coleman. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
It is recommended that the commission adopt the proposed order in the cancellation of certificates of public convenience for telecommunication utilities reporting zero operating revenues.
Is there a motion to adopt staff recommendation?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Kennard, second by Vice Chairman Sweet. Any discussion?
Madam Chairman, I do have a motion on this matter.
Commissioner Coleman.
Thank you. This is a continuation of the conversation we just had, and hopefully I can make this as brief as possible and spare you the unabridged version. Let me start by asking that my motion be entered in the record, though I've read it in its entirety. My motion proposes to tentatively revoke the certificate of public convenience for 30 telecommunication public utilities that the Commission's Bureau of Administration has identified as reporting zero gross intrastate operating revenue on an annual assessment revenue reports for the last 3 calendar years. By repeatedly reporting zero intrastate operating revenue, the telecommunications public utility listed in Appendix A of the staff recommendation have failed to pay for the reasonable cost attributed to their regulation by the Commission and have failed to establish that they are operating continuously in Pennsylvania. In short, I believe that the public utility holding a certificate of public convenience that has reported zero gross intrastate revenue for several years indicated it is no longer providing jurisdictional public utility service in Pennsylvania for compensation. Therefore, a certificate of public convenience for that entity is no longer necessary or proper for the service, accommodation, convenience, or the safety of the public. As such, it is appropriate to initiate the process via a tentative order for canceling the relevant telecommunication public utilities certificate of public convenience as being in the public interest. To the extent that any of the telecommunication public utilities listed in Appendix A of the staff recommendation are providing only interstate services, I tentatively conclude that the carriers do not have a valid legal basis to retain their existing certificate of public convenience in Pennsylvania. As providers of only interstate services, they fall under the exclusive jurisdiction of the Federal Communication Commission. Also, I tentatively conclude that failing to certificate a provider of only interstate service is not a competitive barrier to entry in violation of federal law. Such an outcome would not prohibit or have an effect on prohibiting providers from operating in Pennsylvania. Rather, these providers would be able to operate free from Commission oversight and regulation. Lastly, I note that the proceeding with a tentative order process here to ensure that the telecommunication public utilities listed in Appendix A of the staff recommendation are afforded adequate due process regarding the status of their certificate of public convenience. Therefore, I move that the Law Bureau prepare a tentative order consistent with this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Coleman. You have heard the motion of Commissioner Coleman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Kennard. Any comments or discussion on the motion?
I have a statement on the matter.
Commissioner Place.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, I ask that my statement be placed in the record as if I had read it in its entirety. Before us for disposition is the proposed initiation of a decertification process for a number of competitive telecommunications carriers via a tentative order process. These competitive carriers have been previously certified by this commission to operate within Pennsylvania, and they have reported zero gross intrastate revenues to the commission for a period of 3 years, and consequently, they have not been subject to the commission's fiscal assessments under Section 510 of the Public Utility Code. A number of these carriers have been certified as competitive access providers consistent with our implementation orders that enforce relevant provisions of the Federal Telecommunications Act of 1996. And some of them have distributed energy system providers. Sorry, I'll repeat that. Some of them are distributed antenna system providers. Some of these carriers have already responded to staff data requests as to their respective reporting of zero intrastate revenues to the Commission, and they have premised such reporting on the 10% contamination rule of the Federal Communications Commission that has been in effect in various forms since 1989. The FCC's 10% contamination rule can and does affect jurisdictional classification of private line and special access circuits and services, and the corresponding classification of relevant capital investment, fixed costs, operational costs, and revenues. In short, if such circuits and services receive an intrastate classification because of the types of traffic that they handle, then the telecommunications carrier in question will report zero intrastate revenues to this commission for the purposes of fiscal assessments. The same carrier will report to the FCC the appropriate intrastate revenues for a variety of federal purposes, including the computation of the FCC's regulatory fees. The initiation of a decertification action against competitive carriers that affirmatively invoke or utilize the FCC's longstanding 10% contamination rule and do not report intrastate operating revenues to this commission is plainly wrong for the following reasons. One, it does not afford competitive carriers that invoke or otherwise use the FCC's contamination rule and are targeted in this decertification enforcement action appropriate due process. Two, these competitive carriers are already certified by this commission under the premises of its 1996 implementation orders enforcing the provisions of the Federal Telecommunications Act of 1996. This commission has accepted the operation of the FCC's 10% contamination rule for a very long time. 4, the commission did not provide advance notice involving its change in policy and direction to the affected competitive carriers that invoke or use the FCC's contamination rule. The promulgation of the policy statement regarding the reporting of infrastructure it's a bit of a tongue tie this morning. I'll start that sentence again. The promulgation of the policy statement regarding the reporting of intrastate revenues for jurisdictionally mixed services of telecommunications carriers did not commence until November 2018, and appropriate notice was not published until March 2019. 5, the Commission's initiation of a decertification enforcement process against competitive telecommunications carriers that report zero intrastate revenues to this Commission is selective and discriminatory. 6, incumbent local exchange carriers also offer private line and special access services that are subject to the FCC's 10% contamination rule and are classified as interstate. When that happens, the relevant ILEC intrastate revenues are not reported to this commission and are not subject to intrastate fiscal assessments. 7, several of the targeted competitive carriers compete with the ILECs in the provision of the same private line and special access services that are classified as interstate under the FCC's contamination rule. Thus, the instant commission action constitutes a discriminatory approach among competitive and incumbent providers of the same services within Pennsylvania. This approach violates both the letter and the spirit of Section 253A of the Federal Communications Act of 1996. 8, the theory that competitive telecommunications carriers that invoke or otherwise utilize the FCC's contamination rule and report intrastate revenues to this commission are only interstate carriers and do not need certification is inapplicable. The interstate classification of network facilities and resulting revenues under the contamination rule does not follow that the same network facilities in all likelihood also handle intrastate traffic and provide intrastate services. For these reasons, I will be dissenting from the disposition of this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Place. Any further discussion? I do have comments to be placed on the record. I ask to be placed on the record in their entirety, and to save on time and to avoid duplication of some of the comments you've already heard, I'm going to focus on the one major issue that is a big concern of me. And you already know that this case is dealing with the revocation of certificates of public convenience of some of our telecommunications public utilities. You also know that the Commission previously determined that some of these telecommunication utilities, which are DAS operators, we previously determined that DAS operators are not telecommunications public utilities under Pennsylvania law. That decision is under appeal in our Supreme Court and is subject to a continuing Commonwealth stay. The Commission, in my belief, cannot conclude that these DAS providers are not jurisdictional public utilities and then in the middle of an appeal on that very issue proceed to revoke their CPCs for the failure to report intrastate revenues as a regulated jurisdictional public utility. So for this reason and others that are in my statement, I will be respectfully voting no on this matter. Any further comments or statements? Hearing none? On the motion? No, on the matter, excuse me. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Opposed?
I also will be voting in the negative. The matter passes 3-2, noting the dissent of Commissioner Place and myself.
That's on the motion, Madam Chairman.
On the motion,
That is on the motion.
sorry about that. I'm
Yes.
looking at- There's too many matters.
That's all right.
Same thing.
That's no problem.
On the motion,
On the motion, it's 3-2, yes.
Coleman motion passes 3-2,
Yes.
noting the dissents of Commissioner Place and myself. On the matter as amended, if there's no objection, we take the previous roll call. Seeing no objection, the matter as amended passes 3-2, also noting the dissent of Commissioner Place and myself.
Turning to page 13, it is recommended that the commission adopt the proposed order in the cancellation of certificates of public convenience for telecommunications utilities for failure to operate or file an annual revenue report.
Is there a motion to adopt the staff recommendation?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Kennard, second by Commissioner Coleman. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll be voting in concurring result only.
Okay. The motion passes 5-0, noting that Commissioner Place will be voting to concur in result only.
Turning to page 14, and matters presented by Chief ALJ Rainey in the Office of Administrative Law Judge. It is recommended that the commission adopt ALJ Watson's initial decision in the complaint of Marcy Naughton versus the Pennsylvania Power Company.
Is there a motion to adopt the staff recommendation?
So moved?
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Place, second by Commissioner Kennard. Any discussion?
Madam Chairman, I have a very brief motion on this matter.
Commissioner Coleman.
Thank you. I'd ask that my motion be entered the record as I read it in entirety. This is just a very quick administrative matter. Before the commission for consideration its initial decision, which dismisses the complaint of Marcy Naughton against the Pennsylvania Power Company for the customer's failure to appear at a rescheduled hearing and her failure to prosecute her complaint. The customer was associated with multiple addresses during the case. To remedy an administrative error with one of those addresses, I direct the secretary to reserve the initial decision in accordance with my written motion. Therefore, I move that the initial decision in this matter be reserved on the parties and the Office of Special Assistants prepare an opinion in order consistent with this motion. Thank you.
You have heard the motion of Commissioner Coleman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Kennard. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. If there's no objection, we'll take the previous roll call. Seeing no objection, the matter as amended passes 5-0.
It is recommended that the commission adopt ALJ Watson's initial decision in the complaint of Darlene Stanton versus the Pennsylvania Electric Company.
Is there a motion to adopt the staff recommendation?
So moved?
Is there a second?
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Place, second by Commissioner Coleman. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
Turning to page 15, it is recommended that the commission adopt ALJ Watson's initial decision in the complaint of Diana Cook versus the West Penn Power Company.
Is there a motion to adopt staff recommendation?
So moved?
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Place, second by Commissioner Coleman. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
It is recommended that the commission adopt ALJ Calvelli's initial decision in the complaint of Charles Barry versus the Metropolitan Edison Company.
Is there a motion to adopt staff recommendation?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Kennard, second by Commissioner Place. Any discussion?
Madam Chair, I have a motion.
Vice Chairman Sweet.
Thank you. Please place my motion upon the record as if I had read it in its entirety. Before the commission is the initial decision of Administrative Law Judge Andrew M. Calvelli dismissing the formal complaint that Charles Berry filed against Met Ed. Mr. Berry alleges that the number and length of the 9 service outages to his home in a 2-year period in a housing development in Carlisle constitutes unreasonable and inadequate service within the meaning of the Public Utility Code and the regulations and orders administered by this commission. Mr. Berry presented a detailed and well-organized case, having documented the outages complete with dates, times, and lengths of each outage, even introducing evidence of Med Ed's reliability shortcomings from the commission's own 2017 reliability report. While the ALJ found that 6 of the 9 outages were due to circumstances beyond Med Ed's control, 2 of these were caused by trees falling from outside the right-of-way. The commission does not automatically consider an outage from an off right-of-way tree to exonerate the utility of fault. The commission's review of this issue would be aided by a more detailed evaluation to determine whether the utility has taken sufficient action to prevent the incidents in order to assign fault, and that level of scrutiny did not occur in this case. Here, however, that scrutiny would not change the result. Even assuming the 2 additional outages were Med Ed's fault, that only raises the number to 5 over a 24-month period. The corrective actions taken by Med Ed regarding this line weighs in favor of finding that the service outages were not excessive. I note that a Section 1501 violation regarding unreasonable service is fact-specific as to the number of outages, their causes, and a company's corrective actions, and is not subject to a standard based on the number of outages. I note, too, that the commission is fully empowered to assess a civil penalty to Med Ed if the circumstances support a violation of the established performance standards. In order to keep track of this company's metrics and the performance of the subject line, this case will be referred to the Commission's Bureau of Investigation and Enforcement for its consideration. Therefore, I move that, first, the initial decision of the Administrative Law Judge in the matter captioned Charles Berry versus Metropolitan Edison Company in docket number C-2018-3005410 is adopted as modified by this motion. Secondly, that the copy of the Commission's opinion and order in this matter be served upon the Commission's Bureau of Intelligence and, Investigation and Enforcement for such.
They are intelligent, though.
He sort of looks like a CIA guy. Strike that part. Commission's Bureau of Investigation and Enforcement for such further action as it may deem appropriate. And thirdly, that the Office of Special Assistance prepare an appropriate order and opinion consistent with this motion. Thank you.
You have heard the motion of Vice Chairman Sweet. Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Commissioner Kennard. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0. If there's no objection, we'll take the previous roll call. The matter as amended passes 5-0.
And finally, on page 15, it is recommended that the commission adopt ALJ Brady's recommended decision in the rate case of the Buck Hill Water Company.
Is there a motion to adopt the staff recommendation?
So moved?
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Place, second by Commissioner Coleman. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
Madam Chairman, that concludes the regular agenda. Turning to the carry-in. On page 1 of the carry-in agenda, it is recommended by the Bureau of Consumer Services that the commission adopt the proposed order regarding the First Energy companies.
Is there a motion to adopt the staff recommendation?
So moved?
Is there a second?
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Place, second by Commissioner Kennard. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
Turning to page 2 of the carry-in, it is recommended by the Office of Special Assistance that the commission adopt all 3 items appearing on page 2.
Is there a motion to adopt the staff recommendations?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Coleman, second by Vice Chairman Sweet. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0.
And on page 3 of the carry-in, It is your motion, Madam Chairman, regarding the ratification of appointments to the Consumer Advisory Council.
I'm going to ask Vice Chairman Sweet to preside quickly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You're recognized for the purposes of offering your motion.
This motion is dealing with the Consumer Advisory Council membership. Whereas the Consumer Advisory Council is a viable and effective working organization, and whereas the commission is mandated by regulation to officially appoint and/or ratify members to the council, now therefore it is resolved that the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission pursuant to 52 PA Code Section 94.4C 1 through 3 hereby ratifies and accepts the following appointments to the council for the term beginning July 1st, 2019 and continuing through June 30th, 2021. Appointment by Governor Wolf of Sonny Popowski, appointment by Lieutenant Governor Fetterman of Justin Udo, appointment by Senator Tomlinson, the Majority Chair of the Senate Consumer Protection and Professional Licensure Committee, appointment of Ralph G. Douglas, and the commission at-large appointments are the following: Mary Bach, Carl W. Bailey, Lenora M. Best, Patrick M. Cicero, Timothy B. Hennessy, Chad Quinn, Sylvia P. Sims, and Joseph E. Toner III.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Motion has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing no requests for discussion, will those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 0. The motion is adopted by a vote of 5-0. Thank you. And I turn it back over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much.
And Madam Chairman and Commissioners, that concludes all agenda items to be considered today.
Without objection, I'm assuming there's no objection, we are adjourned.
Thank you.